Hey, what is up, everybody? Welcome to the Guilty as Charged podcast. My name is Steven and I am the host. Joining me is my good friend Tyler. Tyler, what's up, man? How are you doing tonight?
Doing very well. Welcome to our interior offensive line free agent episode, otherwise known as Steven Talks, and Tyler makes a cameo every once in a while.
I can't wait. A lot of good interior offensive linemen for the Chargers. Again, we did our defensive line episode on Tuesday, and the Chargers are very fortunate that this is a defensive line free agency and draft class that lines up for their needs there. In terms of the interior offensive line, it lines up in free agency. It does not line up very well in the draft, in my opinion. Although I think I feel a little better about their chances to land a potential center of the future than I did based off of like how people were talking about it. But yeah, this is definitely a free agency group that the Chargers should pluck from and should be able to find upgrades at both starting guard spots. And I'm excited to dive into some of the potential players today.
Yes, as am I. Before we jump in, because not every player on here is a plug and play, like elite, awesome option. Based on how things went for the interior last season, how do you feel about this Chargers coaching staff? Because we thought offensive line is going to be the best thing, the best coaches, and Hardwick and Harbaugh, and all this stuff coming in. And they really kind of missed on Zion taking a step forward.
Yeah.
Bozeman in general and Trey Pipkins' experiment did not work. Thankfully, Rashawn Slater. I guess I can give them credit for Joe Alt because he was phenomenal. He was a very good prospect as well. How are you feeling about the interior and the coaching staff in general?
I'm definitely in wait and see mode. I sat there in practice and watched them spend so much more time on picking up stunts and run blocking techniques and at training camp. And at that time they had Mike Ayupati and as well. And I was just so impressed at the overall structure of the practices. It was unlike anything that I've seen from an NFL standpoint in my time watching training camp practices. So it felt like there would just be an increased amount of like togetherness and chemistry and all these little issues that had previously plagued the Chargers would increase, and that unfortunately did not come to fruition. So I want to give them the benefit of the doubt based off of like how I saw them practice, and maybe things were just kind of an awkward fit with that particular trio. And we talked about Trey and just how unnatural of a guard he was all season. It's why I understand why they went with him, but I really wish we would have just seen Jamari play all year and Trey could be your swing tackle. But it is what it is. But I think potentially just an awkward fit with the three. Zion's lack of awareness for stunts I thought would just kind of improve with reps. And unfortunately, it just continues to be an issue. So I think some of it is coach driven. Some of it is the fit with the three of them. Some of it is just the two guards in particular not really taking steps forward or adjusting to the new position that we wanted. So I want to wait and see until they get their five guys, the five that they pick. I want to wait and see what that looks like. And I think we'll get that this year. I think we both kind of expect that they'll cut Trey, and Zion at the very least should be, forced into a training camp competition, which did not happen last year. And I understand why that was the case because you can't fix everything, right? But Zion should have competition. There should absolutely be a new long-term paid free agent to come in and replace Trey, and then we'll see what happens at center.
Yeah, I think I mostly agree on all accounts there. It might change like how I view really the top options in this free agent class, because we talked about defensive tackle with Jesse Minter. It's like, I don't know, just any of them. Like,
whoever you want.
Whoever you want, you're probably going to be right, and they're probably going to be good. Like, I trust him completely. This group, it's like, and Greg Roman as well. I think you got to pay for some of these better guys to elevate right now. Maybe that does change in year two, like you said, when they get some of maybe more of their guys and a bit like a better tier than, no offense, but like Bozeman was a very inexpensive signing. So they just make little marginal improvements. Maybe that changes everything and changes how I feel. But for right now, I do feel like the investment is more of a priority here than anything else.
Yeah. So I think they'll be able to get their guys in here, and I think there'll be guys who are more familiar with their schemes and like what they want to do. There's a good amount of players in this show today who have ties to this coaching staff, whether that's through Michigan or through the Ravens, or recruiting trails or things like that. So I am curious to see what it looks like in year two, but at the same time, like Devlin has been in the NFL a really, really long time. Mike Devlin is the Chargers offensive line coach. And when the Chargers hired him, I reached out to a couple of people and I was like, I don't really know anything about this guy. Generally speaking, like the Houston offensive lines were not very good, but is that a front office issue? Is that a scheme issue? And what I heard was essentially that he's going to coach his players hard. There's going to be a lot of attention to the detail. And if you buy into things, then you can play at a really, really high level. And I think we saw some of that with Joe and Rashawn. I just don't know how much stock to put into everything with the way that the interior group was structured from a roster standpoint. So the offensive line community does really like Devlin. Obviously, a lot of people were big fans of Nick Harbert coming in, and they've shown they'll bring in a guy like Mike Iupati to come in and work in practice. So I'm in wait and see mode, but at the same time, I wasn't like, oh my gosh, Mike Devlin, like this is an awesome hire. Like his offensive line's never really had like a great track record, so it's tough to parse through where this all kind of like the blame lies when the trio that they were working with in the middle, two of the three guys were not players that they picked, and the other one, we know Bozeman's limitations very, very well. So
yeah,
I want to see what it looks like in year two.
Yeah, no, and I'm thank you for sharing all that. I just was very curious ahead of this discussion.
Yeah,
what you felt.
Yeah, I am curious your thoughts in terms of like plan. Like you've had some time to look at some of the draft prospects, not a ton, and I haven't looked at a ton either. I don't feel like this is a great interior offensive line class, although for whatever reason, some people really, really liked Tyler Booker. I'm not a huge fan. Some people have mocked him to the Chargers at 22. I don't love that. This definitely is not a great center class, but there are some interesting later options. So for you, in like an ideal scenario, how do the Chargers go about addressing this? And I think that can kind of inform how we look at these players throughout this episode.
Yeah, I think you take care of this in free agency and you find anybody of the future in the draft. At any particular point, I don't know enough of this class to know that, oh, wow, this guy in round 3 is going to be great. I don't know where any of these guys are going to be. I've only watched one actual true interior guy, and it's the guy from USC who's like a 4th, 5th rounder. And maybe that's the direction they go. I don't know. But yeah, I think you take care of this in free agency. And unless the right guy is there in rounds really 2 or 3, it's going to be really hard for me to pass on any of these interior defensive linemen, edge rushers, running backs, even receivers, and to some extent tight end, depending on who it is. I don't know, man. I don't want them to feel like they have to take a guy. So take care of it in free agency. You've got plenty of money. It aligns with your philosophy. You don't have to see if this guy develops or is any good. You know he's good, or at least serviceable. And you go into the draft, find your center of the future. I think not that the Colts signed Ryan Kelly, and we'll talk about him, but them having Kelly, drafting Bortolini, that sounds great to me. Many NFL teams had this plan last year. Chargers, unfortunately, did not.
Yeah, we've talked about this, but the one miss from Joe Ortiz would be great to just hand this thing over to Bo Limmer or Hunter Norzad or Tanner Bortolini, who the Colts drafted. So unfortunately, they do not get to have that opportunity for this year. But I think for me, in an ideal scenario, you get one of the top right guard options, and you sign that player to a 3-4 year deal, and that's your long-term right guard option next to Joe Alt. And then you have to get somebody who can, at minimum, give a legit competition to Zion and or Bradley Bozeman. We're going to talk about the centers, and I know people want to change, and I get it. We'll talk about it, but I do expect Bradley Bozeman to return. I'm just going to throw that out there right now. I expect Bozeman to be back. So at minimum, I need right guard solved long term, and I need somebody who can challenge Zion or Bradley at left guard or center. And I think you can get both of those in this class. in this free agency group, I should say. And then probably in the draft, I'm addressing center of the future, and I'm probably taking some kind of, developmental offensive tackle late on day 3, given where the other needs of this draft class are. And that would give you, a really solid 9 offensive linemen. Foster Sorrell, I think, is a restricted free agency. You bring him back, take a couple undrafted free agent swings and figure out the room elsewhere. But that's kind of my mindset is you solve right guard with a big contract. You get somebody else in that can be a swing interior guy. And then you potentially could have Zion and Jamari as backups, which I know they're not like great starters, but having those two as backups could be pretty good for both of them. And for the Chargers, that's a good situation.
Yeah, I will say that while Zion should definitely be pushed in camp, I totally expect him to be the starting left guard. I don't see how they have enough to get both center and right guard solved, and then also left guard. So I think that Zion is ultimately the starter here.
Yeah, and that wouldn't surprise me one bit. Okay, let's get into these interior offensive linemen then. Should be a fun conversation. As always, we are going to so did you say for me?
Yes.
Hey, we got 164 people in here.
All right.
Everybody knows how bad the Chargers offensive line was last year. So I would hope that this is an episode that everybody is really, really interested in figuring out how we can solve this issue for the Chargers. But we'll see how it goes, I guess. Okay, so we obviously, every single episode we're going to do for these, we're going to have a top of the market game changer. There were 2 interior defensive linemen. There's only one interior offensive lineman, and that is Mr. Trey Smith, a guy who we loved in the draft process, or at least I loved in the draft process. I'm pretty sure you did as well.
Yeah.
But there was the blood clot issue that forced him to drop all the way down to the 6th round, which is still crazy to me. That was a guy who was consensus like interior offensive lineman 1 or 2, or like worst case 3, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
And then 6th round, like we were still waiting to see where he would end up. And unfortunately, he ends up in the Chiefs, plays next to Creed Humphrey, and it's been a great time for him. So he was obviously on his rookie contract. He is expected to challenge for a top of the market deal from what I've seen online. PFF does project this as a 4-year, $20.5 million APY contract. I think that is, again, similar to T. Higgins, maybe baking in a little bit of a hometown discount for him. Because if this is a guy who actually does hit the market, I mean, we just saw Robert Hunt get $20 million per year, 5-year contract. Yeah. And Robert Hunt is nowhere close to the kind of player that Trey Smith is. So if Trey hits free agency, I expect that to be a significantly larger number than 20.5. I think this is a guy who can completely reset the market. And obviously for the Chargers and anybody who needs offensive line help, he rightfully should be the top of the guard list for them.
Yeah, I completely agree. This is so even with T. Higgins, even with the contract he was projected to get, and let's say they assumed about that contract, he was not a market resetter. He wasn't obviously even going to pass Chase on his own team. But with Smith, this is the first guy that we've talked about, I think, in any of the shows we've done, that is actually going to reset the market, or at least get top 2 at worst. And I think that because he's the only guy, really, really the only high-end guy out there, that he will reset the market. Who is it? Atticus is asking about if the Super Bowl affects his Trey Smith stock. I don't really think so. I think that maybe just boosts Milton Williams stock or Sweat stock. But I don't really think it affects Smith's stock a ton. But this is a guy, the pass blocking numbers have been solid, but he's definitely more of a run blocking type. And that's exactly what the Chargers would go for. He's a huge individual. This is a guy who technically could play tackle in a pinch if needed. I don't think they would ever want him to do that, but
he's 6'6", by the way, for anyone who doesn't know.
Huge dude. And as far as looking back at the old draft grades for us, he was like, in terms of grade, a top 3 guy for us. The issue was obviously the things that made him fall that we weren't so sure about. I don't know, where do you place that? I honestly, of everyone we've discussed so far at the top end of the markets that we've discussed, this is the player that I ultimately want. Some of it's draft priors, sure, liked him, so it'd be good to get Trey Smith off of the Chiefs and on the Chargers. I think it really comes down to does he leave at all? And the Chiefs, frankly, after watching their performance in the Super Bowl, they shouldn't be losing players. So finding a way to keep him around would make sense. I also do think, and not that he's the only player who's gone through this or discussed religion, but I think that I was looking through what he went through with his blood clots and the pulmonary embolisms and all that sort of stuff, and his recovery and his his faith and being put on a path and stuff like that. And so when thinking of a guy who's that open about his faith and going through a medical scare, I thought, I bet you he'd sit down with Harbaugh and have a pretty good discussion on things like that. And I don't know. There's something about that really just makes me feel like that's just another thing. I'm sure a lot of these guys have gone through something, have faith, whatever, but there is something specific about what he's gone through that I do think that Harbaugh would connect to. And he's a guy who's literally almost been there every single day for the Chiefs, has only missed one game. This issue is complete, as far as I'm aware, completely behind him. I didn't find anything where there were other issues. Has played this way and that way, has played plenty in the postseason as well, played in Denver. So I don't think there's a concern. But I just think that connection is potentially there, just in their hearts, if you will. And then, of course, he played at Tennessee with Chargers' current defensive quality control coach, Robert Muschamp. He was recruited by Jay Harbaugh and Tim Drevno. And Drevno is not the Chargers' offensive line coach, but he was very much so been connected with Harbaugh, I think, at least 3 separate stops. So a lot of connections there, a lot of information on him. And frankly, obviously, the Chargers have seen him twice a year now. So I don't know, man. I feel like this is kind of the one that happens if they let him leave.
Yeah, if the Chiefs let him leave is the big question, because I think they had their response to the previous Super Bowl loss to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers was Creed Humphrey, Trey Smith. Let's go pay a left tackle. Let's go pay Joe Thuney. Let's do all these things. And I expect them to have a similar response because they understand who they have at quarterback. So them letting Trey Smith leave goes counterintuitive to how their vision goes. But at the same time, they don't have a ton of cap space. Now, Travis Kelce can retire, which there's been a decent amount of smoke there, which please, for the love of God, retire. Get the fuck out of here, Travis. So sick of watching you. So there's a decent chance that they can free up some cap space. You can always restructure Mahomes' contract. He still, I think, has 5 more years on that deal, which is crazy to me. At the same time, there's other guys like Trent McDuffie who's due for a new contract and things like that. So I think there's a decent chance that he does hit free agency. I don't think it's a likely thing, but I don't think it's impossible that he does. Whereas, somebody like Milton Williams, I would love to see. I have a really hard time seeing the Eagles let him walk, because that's their bread and butter is, homegrown defensive line talent. So of the guys that we're talking about that are true market setters, Trey is the most sure thing. And I think that is a statement that is comfortably true. Even T. Higgins, who people love and want the Chargers to go draft, he has missed 13 games in the last 3 seasons. Mm-hmm. He's billed as a true contested catch guy. He's really not that great at it, or at least not that efficient at it, based on the numbers. So Trey Smith, exactly the kind of player that you are getting. There are definitely some pass blocking issues, but at the same time, his pass blocking efficiency rating was 97.6. It would be by far the highest number the Chargers have had at right guard in quite some time. And so he's not an amazing pass protector, but he's definitely above average in that regard.
Yeah.
And what he lacks in pass protection, he definitely overcomes in run blocking. And sometimes you'll see a guy will be good on ESPN's numbers and a guy will be good on PFF's numbers, but they don't line up. And a lot of it is just kind of how those, outlets are viewing things. He was top 10 in pure run blocking grade in Pro Football Focus, 15th specifically in gap scheme. And then he was 6th in ESPN's run blocking win rate. This is the only guy in the top 15 in PFF's run blocking and ESPN's run blocking. All of the other players are all different. So he's the only guy who both platforms say this guy is an elite run blocker.
Yeah.
And I think we've seen that, right? Like we've seen what he can do for the last 4 years. So it fits the style, it fits the culture, it fits the size. The main question is, what if he hits free agency? And then you have this listed too. The blood clot issues haven't popped up yet, but we saw with Russell Okung that eventually they did pop back up, and hopefully that's not the case for Trey, but it is something that I think teams will have to at least look into while potentially signing him.
Yeah. But overall, I honestly would be comfortable with this contract. It's a lot, obviously, but even if you think he deserves a bit less, I will gladly let another person pay more money for some peace of mind at this spot and along the offensive line.
Yeah, of the pricey guys who might hit free agency, I think you and I are on the same page that Trey would be the most likely Chargers target. So
are you talking like with Higgins and Osa and these guys?
Yeah, Higgins, Osa, Milton. Yeah. We're going to do secondary options next week. There's not a true market setter in the secondary as far as I know. But hypothetically speaking, between Trey, Milton, and Osa, I would say that Trey Smith would be the most likely to end up as a Charger.
Yeah, it's the one I put the most money on. It's a clear need. It's a clear philosophy thing. They took Joe Alto from Malik Neighbors. Like that tells you right there kind of where they prioritize, where their money goes. And so, yeah, if you can steal it from the Chiefs too, even better.
Yeah, I was going to say that's the added benefit is you get to take a great player away from the Chiefs. So that'd be nice to do every once in a while, as opposed to the other way around.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other thoughts on Trey Smith before we jump to the next one?
Nope.
Okay. The next tier we have pricey starters, which the first one here could maybe be classified differently if we wanted to get a little technical here, but this is Will Fries or Fries. I don't know what the technical pronunciation is. I've heard both. So I'm going with Fries because it's cooler and he's an offensive lineman. Like you got to go with the food pronunciation. So Pro Football Focus projects a 4-year, $14.31 million APY contract. His evaluation is pretty tricky. Again, I'm not going to sit here and pretend to watch, a ton of Colts tape, but a lot of the offensive line community love this guy. Think he is one of the better options in free agency. The numbers don't exactly back that up. I mean, he was 36 in Pro Football Focus's wins above replacement this past season, 31st in 2023. He did have an 86.9 grade in 4.5-ish games this year. But his pass blocking efficiency rating is just 97.2 for his career, which is it's good. It's better than what the Chargers have had, but I don't know if that's really worth $14.3 million. So I have a tough time wrapping my head around this one, given the potential kind of contract. The numbers don't really match up with his reputation. But you listen to guys like Brandon Thorne and Robert Mays and Mike Golick Jr. and Mitchell Schwartz, or not Mitchell Schwartz, Jeff Schwartz. They all think this guy has legit potential to be a future, high-end guard. But right now, from the numbers perspective, we haven't really seen that back up just quite yet.
No, this is a tricky one for sure. It's almost Malcolm Kuntz we're where he had the one great year, and then you really don't have a whole lot to go off of because we'll go with Fries. It feels wrong, but I like it. Will is pronounced French, so French fries.
Yeah, there you go.
Guard. There's not much to go off. This is going to be our new bit. Apparently, we're just going to go with the offensive line names are all food related. Will Clapp, Will Fries, truffle fries, Will Carne asada fries. Yeah. I'll take it. Yeah, love it. I don't know when I saw his rankings and the contract, I figured what are the numbers here? Obviously not Trey Smith, but should be relatively close, right? But the lack of playing time overall, the injuries. I mean, he was out for the year last year, and I guess that does bring him down about six. Shush, doggy, brings him down about $6 million from Trey Smith. But
yeah,
I don't know, man. This was a very tough sell. I'll trust the film guys who do also, of course, love Trey Smith, but I don't love sinking money into too much of an unknown here. And whereas with Kuntz, I go, hey, Jesse Minter, do your thing. It'll be awesome, I'm sure. I don't know about Fries.
Right. Right.
And whether these guys can make it work. That's still funny to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, despite the numbers not being great, PFF does have him as their 24th ranked, free agent overall out of 100. So there, again, I feel like I'm missing something with his evaluation, and if the Chargers sign him, I will obviously go and watch a lot of his tape. But the numbers just don't really match up with what we're seeing from a contractual projection standpoint and like ranking standpoint. Matt Bowen of ESPN did his top 50 free agents, and I want to say he was like even higher than 24th on that list. So there again, there's a lot of fans around Will Fries, and we'll see what happens there. But it is a tricky evaluation. He is another former Penn State player who is tied to the Chargers quality control / receivers coach Jeff Carpenter. Obviously, we talked about Mike Gesicki and Chris Godwin on previous episode. So there is stuff there, and we know that the Chargers obviously got to watch him up close and personal every single year when Michigan played Penn State. There's definitely a stylistic fit in terms of the size, in terms of the run blocking emphasis, but it is a little tricky here overall.
Yeah, surprised by PFF's evaluation of him. I don't know if that's just a market thing where maybe he is the second best guy, and therefore that's the contract. But even their numbers don't really paint him as a guy that's like great.
Yeah. So decent sized contract, but I would keep an eye on this one, Chargers fans. I really would. I think this is somebody that the Chargers will be very interested in if Trey Smith is not available.
Winkety wink wink.
Wink wink wink. Okay, next one here is Mr. Tevin Jenkins of the Chicago Bears, previously on his rookie contract. PFF projects him a little under the Will Fries number. I'm never going to be able to not laugh at that name now. So, we'll see what happens there. But 3 years, $13.3 million APY in terms of Tevin Jenkins. I forgot to update the first point there, so that's my mistake. But from a stylistic fit, like we just saw them do the Trey Pipkins experiment, and Tevin Jenkins has kind of been that exact same, career arc, if you will. He's done tackle, guard, convert in his NFL career. We all love Tevin Jenkins coming out of the draft. His RAS scored 9.74. Is definitely something that checks out in terms of how the Chargers would want to play at that position. The difference is that this is a guy who, when he's been on the field, has been highly productive and highly efficient as a run blocker, as a pass protector. 14th in run blocking grade, 18th specifically in gap scheme. He was 16th overall in pass blocking efficiency rating, and he was even better last year for the Bears. So this is a guy who has not panned out to be like a star level player that they drafted him to be, maybe, but he's become a really, really good guard, and I think would fit rather well in terms of the style, in terms of the size, in terms of the scheme fit. This is a guy who, if he can stay healthy, which is the big concern here, that I think the Chargers would really like as well.
I believe this is famously the player that's either Brett Coleman's highest viewed video where he didn't monetize it or couldn't monetize it, and he feels terrible about it because he has like a million something views and no finances from it.
Sounds right. Yeah.
But yeah, loved Tevin Jenkins. If you watch Tevin Jenkins or if you watch Brett Coleman's video, you know who he is. And I really, even as early as last year, watching him ahead of like the Chargers game, really liked what he was able to do, what he was getting to be able to do finally, being on the field and playing at guard. Plenty of good stuff there. I will say I would worry more about the switch to right guard. Now, I guess technically Zion could be right guard. And I suppose if you pay someone $13.3 million, maybe that is the guy you prioritize at the spot.
Probably
working for him, but I at least do kind of trust the Chargers staff to have someone switch from left to right because it worked for Joe Alt. Now, granted, not everybody's Joe Alt, and frankly, not many guys have ever been Joe Alt, but I've at least seen that. So I do kind of feel that he could pull that off.
Yeah.
Did he play?
He played right tackle in college.
I was going to say, he played right tackle at Oklahoma State, I believe.
Yeah.
So, or is it Oregon State? Oklahoma State. There you go. Something State. So yeah, I think we can make it work. I like Jenkins over Fries.
Yeah, the numbers definitely back that up, and I think the play style backs that up. To me, this is like if you wanted Trey Smith at a discount, you pay Tevin Jenkins. Like the play style, the run blocking emphasis, the tenacity. Like this is the kind of player that you're getting. Somebody who's going to play through the whistle, etc. Um, the issue for me is the injury history. It's not great. He was on the injury report last year 8 times. He missed 4 games, but it was 8 different times he was either listed as like questionable or doubtful or whatever. So that's not great. There's a history of back issues, which is the reason why he kind of fell in the draft. He was projected pretty much as a lock in terms of being a first round pick, and then all the back issues came out, and that's why he fell to the end of the second round, I want to say. So there's an injury history here that gives me some pause, and obviously Will Fries also has some injury history to his name as well. But that was one broken leg, whereas Tevin Jenkins has back issues, rib issues, ankle, calf, everything, unfortunately, has kind of bothered him. He hasn't missed a ton of games in his NFL career. It's only been, I think, 8 or 9 in his career, but he's been on the injury report a ton. And so it's almost similar to like a Mike Williams thing where like he'll probably play through it, but he's going to be dealing with something like the entire year. But from a play style standpoint, physicality, size, everything I think matches up. And like you mentioned, I think he could play left guard. I think he could play right guard. I think he could be their swing tackle if they really wanted to have him that way too.
Yeah.
So this does check a lot of boxes for me. But if I'm the Chargers, I would want to definitely make sure that I host him for a visit. I get him in with the doctors. I make sure he's good to go from a back standpoint in particular. And then you just, if the doctors sign off and you feel good about him, Tevin Jenkins would definitely be my preference right now over Will Fries for sure.
Yeah, I think I agree.
All right. Before we continue, I do have to tell you guys about our friends over at Prize Picks, the best and easiest way to consume daily fantasy sports. Of course, football season is over, but that doesn't mean the fun stops at Prize Picks. Whether you're into the NBA or Major League Baseball or the National Hockey League, Prize Picks has you covered. They are going to have several specials for March Madness as well. College basketball, of course. That is right around the corner. Crazy enough. I feel like I just barely get into college basketball and the season's about to end. So, it's a fun time. Best way to use daily fantasy sports. You don't have to go 5 for 5 on a parlay to win money. You can go 3 for 5 and still win money. And it is super user-friendly, great to use. Love our partnership with them. And huge shout out to Prize Picks. So you can go to prizepicks.com/guilty, code guilty to get access there. Again, that is prizepicks.com/guilty, code guilty at checkout. All right, let's get to the aforementioned Ryan Kelly. His previous contract was at the time a market-setting deal, 4 years, $12.4 million APY. That was passed by Corey Linsley and now several others. And PFF does project him as a 2-year, $9.5 million APY contract. The questions here, and we can get into the positives, but the questions that I have about Ryan Kelly is he seems pretty committed to the Colts. Like he publicly, and it sounds like, some people reporting on him have expected him to finish his career in Indianapolis, and he's had nothing but positive things there. So I'm curious if he does even want to hit the market. And then the second thing, similar to Tevin Jenkins, isn't the injury history is not great. Back issues, knee issues, neck issues. He has had 3 concussions. He's only played over 1,000 snaps 4 of his 9 seasons. And the main thing with the injury history is that before the 2021 season, this was a guy who most people consider like at the top of the pecking order in terms of centers. Like he was an elite center, and then he dealt with a season-ending knee injury in 2021, and he's been good, but he's definitely not been the same kind of level. So I think there is a potential here that you sign him and you're not getting the same kind of player even that he was this past season. So the age, the injury history, does he actually want to hit the market? I think are all legit question marks in my opinion.
Yeah, so the concerns are definitely there, and again, which is why I'd love if the Chargers had some sort of heir apparent waiting in the wings, even if it's a day, round 7 pick. but they have really nothing in that regard. The good news is, unlike the players we discussed recently, this is a relatively reasonable contract, assuming that's what it is. 2 years, $9.5 million, which probably means it's really a 1-year deal with an out in year 2 sort of thing. Take on some, dead money or whatever. But you could, should this go completely horrible, get out of this contract, I'm sure, in year 2. Because you might also have a guy like a Bordolini. I'm surprised. So if he's committed to Indy, is the chatter that he would then be the starter?
Yeah.
Or that he...
Yeah. So I was reading it. Some of the beat reporters don't truly think that Bordolini is like ready to be the guy. And they also think like, if you're going to make the Anthony Richardson thing work, you probably got to have the pieces around him be right. And if you miss on Bordolini and you don't have Ryan Kelly, like theoretically, if Bordolini has a bad second season and Ryan Kelly's goes somewhere else and has a great season, that would not be great for Anthony Richardson. So I think the thought process is, he loves being in Indianapolis. Apparently the Colts probably need to get Anthony Richardson right. And so Ryan Kelly being back would help them fix that.
Oh man, well, I don't want to hear them use like logic and do safe smart like that. Like, hold on, guys, hear me out here. So we don't have Drew Dahlman on here for schematic.
That is correct.
People are going to wonder. Someone in the chat already said, like, I'm sick of hearing about Drew Dahlman. He's not a scheme fit. Dahlman's only played 318 gap blocking snaps in his career. Kelly, almost 1,200. Granted, that's a longer career, but the split with Dahlman is usually like 80% zone, 20% gap. So not that he's never done it, but I'm sure the Chargers have a different shakeout than that. This kind of feels like it for center.
Yeah, this is part of the issue with the Bradley Bozeman thing.
Right.
Unequivocally, Ryan Kelly is the best option for them. And if he does hit free agency, I would hope that they would at least be interested in him. He's a gap scheme blocker. Like his shtick is that he is a really powerful run blocking center. He is 6th in gap scheme grade, 18th in pass blocking efficiency rating, 10th in ESPN's pass block win rate. So I think there are some concerns that maybe he's not the same player, but he still would be a significant upgrade at center over Bradley Bozeman. And I think he checks a lot of boxes in terms of what they look for. He was hired, or he signed to Alabama and started his career after Jim Harbaugh was coaching at Michigan. So there's no like recruiting ties that we can lean back to. But I think if he hits free agency, like he's obviously the number one option. So we've said this a couple of times. Drew Dahlman, like I know he went to Stanford, but that was a different coaching regime. And, that was not Jim Harbaugh. I don't think you have to be a large center. Like, I don't think you have to be Bradley Bozeman's size or Ryan Kelly's size, but you have to be able to execute gap scheme blocks. And we have zero evidence that Drew Dahlman can do that. His grades on run blocking drop significantly when he goes to gap scheme. So that's one of the main reasons why I reached out to some Falcons people. They think Dahlman will hit free agency because they want to do more gap scheme stuff. And Drew Dahlman actively cannot do it. So Dahlman is like somebody that I would just pencil into Miami or San Francisco or somebody that's going to run a ton of wide zone because that's who he is as a player. So I do not think Drew Dahlman is a fit whatsoever, even though he did go to Stanford and probably knows Jim and things like that. But he is not a scheme fit at all.
Yeah. Real quick, I believe you explained this before live, but just because we're on the topic right now, why then did the Ravens get Linderbaum if he's more of a athletic mover type? I know you've told me the answer, but like just for those who are listening.
Yeah. No, that's a valid question that I'm sure people will talk about. But Tyler Linderbaum can block anything. He is strong enough and was, I think, one of the best power lifters in the state of Iowa when he was in high school. He has the wrestling background. Even if you're not like super naturally strong, which he is, or large, you can win those gap scheme concepts with leverage. It's what made Jason Kelce so great is that it didn't really matter what scheme the Eagles were running. He was still able to execute and play at a high level. So Tyler Linderbaum is that kind of world where Drew Dahlman is almost exclusively a wide zone center because he needs to be able to get out in space to execute things. He's not somebody who's going to move people off of the ball where Tyler Linderbaum can. So in the simplest of fashions, Linderbaum is built different and Drew Dahlman is not.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I don't even know what the size difference is, but I know Linderbaum's, so he's 296. What is Drew Dahlman? Not that they haven't gotten bigger.
I think he's 295. I want to say
he was 299. Huh. All right.
Yeah. So it's more of an ability to execute properly, I would say.
Yeah, for sure.
Next one in here.
Not 299.
Not 299. Very much bigger. Very much a larger human. Mekhi Becton, the right guard from the Philadelphia Eagles, also formerly tackle of the New York Jets. This is a really interesting one for Chargers potential, for Eagles potential, because he was drafted as a left tackle. I think he's 6'8". Like, he is a large human. And, the Eagles are the first team to say, hey, you know what? You'd be the biggest guard in the NFL, but, like, let's try it out and see what happens. And the individual numbers were not amazing, but the Eagles players and team love this man. And he's one of the more popular players on their team, from what I can gather. As you have in why could he return to the previous team? He's never had success anywhere else. Like, if you're him, why would you want to leave Jeff Stoutland and company? So very curious there. PFF does project a 3-year, $9 million APY kind of contract. Similar to Fry's, I don't know if the numbers really back that up. I think this is more of a let's bet on the ceiling kind of conversation. He just played guard for the first time. Very clearly athletic, very clearly large, physical, run blocker. The splash blocks are super fun to watch, super fantastic. So this is definitely a bet on traits, definitely a bet on, physicality, athletic ceiling, being able to improve, significantly from the first year at guard. Otherwise, the numbers are not backing up this kind of contract.
Yeah, I was definitely surprised the numbers weren't as good. I didn't really pay attention to his numbers, but just watched him on game day in passing, obviously in the Super Bowl. I'm like, okay, pretty good. Numbers not so great. So I guess on the one hand, you could view it as there's room to improve. Like, statistically, there's room to improve, and another year at right guard could do very well for him. On the other hand, what the hell are they? What does he look like outside of Jeff Stoutland? Like, when he leaves the only place and the best place, playing next to Lane Johnson, no less.
Yep.
When he leaves that situation, not that playing next to Joel, it's a horrible situation. Is he worse?
But it's not Stoutland.
Better. Correct. So that's kind of why I want to discuss some of the issues. Like, how do we feel about the coaching staff? Because for the Eagles, we'll take anybody and turn them into a superstar for the most part.
Yeah.
I don't know if the Chargers can then take Becton and keep that consistent play, or improve upon that play. Now, $9 million a year isn't going to kill the Chargers should that experiment fail.
Sure.
But I don't want it to fail. But at the same time, they also don't have a ton of options here.
Yeah. Yeah. The Mekhi Becton situation, like, a few weeks ago, I was like probably all aboard this train. But you put on here his pass blocking efficiency rating was tied with Zion. And it seems like there's some I'm a natural tackle and like similar issues to Trey Pipkins playing guard.
Right.
So if I'm the Eagles, I'm 100% comfortable to pay that contract because I have Jeff Stoutland to fix all of those issues, because I have Lane Johnson and everybody else along that line. I would feel very confident that you can make that work. He could always be your swing tackle. So those are, that's a potential reason why he works for the Chargers too, because if this is an upgrade over Trey Pipkins, like, you feel pretty good about that, but the numbers don't really show he's a significant upgrade there. So he's 47th in Pro Football Focus's wins above replacement, pass blocking efficiency rating, not very good. The gap scheme run blocking grade, I would have pictured in my head that he would be like 9th. Instead, he was 29th. So is he an upgrade over Trey Pipkins? Probably, especially as a run blocker, which was Trey's biggest issue. You would feel comfortable with Mekhi being a much more effective run blocker. But hypothetically speaking, if you go from Jeff Stoutland to Mike Devlin and you're not able to fix those natural tackle issues at guard, you're not really getting a big upgrade at guard. You're mostly just getting a more physical player who can, impact the run game in a more positive way, but you're probably dealing with the same kind of issues from a pass protection standpoint.
Yeah, this is, at least in terms of APY this year, we'll see what he gets paid, but it's just kind of a contract swap with Pipkins.
Yeah, pretty much. And the other thing that we have to bring up, Chad Alexander was in New York his entire time. He watched him not live up to that potential the entire time. So I do wonder if that's, something that Chad Alexander would be, not that he has like a ton of sway and not that he would not be open to this kind of situation. But if I were Chad Alexander, I'd be like, I don't know if I buy this very much outside of Philadelphia because I saw it for 4 years in New York. So I think that is at least something to keep in mind.
Yeah. Obviously at tackle, but I think for him, it was maybe more like, because weren't there concerns with him showing up either in shape or on time?
Yes, there were issues. I want to say heading into the 2023 season that a lot of Jets media were like, he's so overweight. And Duke Manyweather, for what it's worth, I mean, I know he goes to bat for all of his guys, but he was like, he's never out of shape. Like, he's in great shape. He's just huge. He's just 6'8" and 360 pounds. So it just looks different. But those issues were definitely brought to light from the Jets media. So I don't know how much I buy it. The Jets media, they make any issue out to be a huge deal. So, yeah, but it is something that was reported on.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, next one here is Mr. Aaron Banks, the right guard from the San Francisco 49ers, former Notre Dame offensive lineman as well. So the Chargers love to make that connection continue. So coming off his rookie contract, very similar deal to Mekhi Becton, 3 years, $9 million APY for Mr. Aaron Banks. This one, if you just look at the numbers, you're probably not super convinced that this can happen in terms of his grades and things like that. So 97.1 pass blocking efficiency rating, again, isn't great, but it is an improvement over what the Chargers got this past season. 23rd best gap scheme grade in 2024. So I think that does hint at some potential alignment there. I reached out to our 49ers Blue Wire cohort, if you will, and they said that, the reports were basically that he was very inconsistent across his 3 seasons starting because he didn't play as a rookie. But most people seem to like him in terms of, the potential here. Just never really panned out. So there are similar issues in that regard to Zion, where you're dealing with a player who's not really super consistent, although his numbers are definitely better than what Zion has given them. But from what I remember from his draft evaluation, I mean, he's 6'5", 325, and he's been in San Francisco playing mostly in a wide zone scheme. And I never really understood why the 49ers selected him and made him into this wide zone guard when he's not a wide zone profile. So I do think there is something to be said that the system and scheme in San Francisco were not a fit for him as an individual, as an athlete, as a size guard that fits better into a gap scheme situation. So I loved Aaron Banks coming out of that draft class. I was very, very high on him. Most of the offensive line community was. I think most of them also think that this was a very poor fit for him. So if you're the Chargers, you're betting on this being a better situation for him schematically, a better situation for him just systematically, and maybe that allows you to get the upside that Aaron Banks has out of him and help him reach his potential there. So this, differently than some of the other conversations where like Mekhi Becton, he's already been in a gap scheme. We've never seen Aaron Banks in a gap scheme. And so I think the Chargers could potentially be the team to make this work out.
Okay. No, I definitely didn't know that. I didn't know that I mean, obviously I know about San Francisco, but in terms of the fit, it had been so long since I watched Banks, I didn't even remember what I thought.
Yeah, I had to go back to my draft notes on this one because he was somebody that I liked quite a bit.
Yeah, it is 325, so definitely not a smaller guy. Yeah, cool. That sounds good to me. I had nothing to add.
And yes, apologies for the typo up top. Says right guard, on the bottom he has exclusively played left guard. So again, that's probably a situation where Zion is moving positions. Aaron Banks did have, I believe, 2 starts in college at right tackle, so he could theoretically also move. But I think this one is another one to pay attention to. He visited Michigan several times during his recruitment. Jay Harbaugh recruited him several times, went to visit him, I think at least 3 different times at his high school. And so the Michigan was very, very interested in Aaron Banks. And like, how dare he choose Notre Dame? Like, Notre Dame is offensive line U. So I think this one, in terms of the non-Trey Smith options, I kind of have talked myself into Aaron Banks being my top option after him.
Yeah.
But I definitely can understand why other people would want those other options that we mentioned previously.
Yeah, I like that. Wouldn't be super costly. You could turn his career around a little bit. So yeah, I don't mind that at all.
Yeah. Next one here, Patrick McCarry, another player. We're going to get into a few former Ravens here in a bit. Patrick McCarry is definitely somebody that this regime is very familiar with. Obviously, as the scheme fits with Greg Roman, Mike Devlin was drafted by Joe Ortiz, etc. The numbers here are a little tricky, so this is another one where I would really have to go back and watch the tape here. But what I absolutely love about Patrick McCarry is that he has started multiple games at all 5 positions in the NFL: left tackle, left guard, center, right guard, right tackle. He's done it all. The position that he plays the most, I think, has been right guard. But he did just play the entire season basically at left guard. So this is a guy who I think makes a ton of sense, obviously from the connections, but just gives the Chargers a really nice ability of flexibility that they haven't really had. Like, Jamari can kind of play tackle. This is somebody who has flat out played tackle very, very well in past seasons. So this is somebody, I think, if he leaves Baltimore, I think the Chargers would be foolish to not at least make this call here. So he is projected 3 years, $8.6 million APY. And I would be thrilled to have Patrick McCarry on the Chargers.
Where?
I think you pay him and you figure it out. Like, in this scenario where Trey Smith is gone, I think you could reasonably afford Aaron Banks and Patrick McCarry. And I think McCarry could be your right guard. I think Aaron Banks could be your left guard. Bozeman's probably your center in this kind of situation. And you just completely change your guard situation. So worst case scenario is he's an expensive backup. I do kind of doubt he gets 8.6 million.
Right.
Like, he's valuable to the Ravens and he's versatile, but he's never been like a truly like great player. He doesn't have the draft pedigree. So I am a little curious about that particular contract number. But he was 18th in ESPN's pass block win rate. Again, he started all 5 positions. Like, every team needs a guy like him. So I do think there is a world where he pushes past like $7 million ish, but you know, we'll see.
Okay, cool.
No thoughts there?
No, what am I supposed to share? You played a lot of different positions, familiarity with Ortiz. I still don't think Zion gets replaced, but otherwise I have nothing to add.
That's fair. But yeah, would love to see Patrick McCarry come over.
Cool.
Okay. Next one here are potential starters on the budget. So these are probably guys who maybe challenge Zion in camp and then probably lose the position battle, according to Tyler. We'll see. The first one here is an actual center, though. So I think this one is worth keeping an eye on. He's a younger center. He's not a super heavy center. But this is somebody, Coleman Shelton, who can play in a gap scheme offense. He's done gap scheme and zone scheme very well in multiple places with the Rams and with the Bears. He was 15th in ESPN's pass block win rate, 10th in PFS wins above replacement, 21st in pass blocking efficiency rating, and 8th in gap scheme grade. So the numbers here paint a better picture. When I was listening to some of the offensive line guys talk about him, it was not great. So I don't really know. Like, the numbers for the Rams are good, numbers from the Bears are good, but apparently the film does not line up. I don't know really what to make of it. He is only projected to be a 2-year, $5 million APY kind of contract. So similar to Ryan Kelly, I don't know if you're the Bears. Do you really want to let your starting center just walk in free agency when you can easily afford him? And it's a bad center class. So something to keep an eye on, but he's definitely more athletic than Bradley Bozeman. He has played both schemes and done so effectively. So this is an interesting center to keep an eye on.
Sure. You think I was doing a Coleman Shelton homework? I got nothing for you.
That's fair.
I will not keep this episode going longer with a repeat of what you said.
That's fair. No injury history either. So he's played every game the last 2 years that he has been the starter. So that's good.
Nice. I'll next give you one then. Fine. I'll bet you $5 Ben Bredeson is a player the Chargers sign.
Okay.
Now, why didn't they do it last year? I don't know. But because they could have done it last year. Yeah. I'll bet you $5 Bredeson is someone they signed this offseason.
I wouldn't be opposed, man. He was pretty good with the Buccaneers. He's not, I don't think he's like a tier 1 starter by any means, but I think he would be a valuable backup. I think this is somebody who could push Zion for a starting spot. Mm-hmm. Obviously, former Michigan Wolverine, drafted by the Ravens. I think he checks size boxes. I think he checks the scheme fit. I didn't realize this because Liam Cohen obviously comes from the Rams background, but they like never ran zone. It was a ton of gap scheme this past year. And Ben Bredeson had his true like breakout season, if you will. So this is not like a legit starter, but for the Chargers, he could fill that spot. So he could play either guard spot. He also played center a little bit in Baltimore for what it's worth. So this is probably like backup option number 1.
Yeah, I definitely think it's obviously $5 worth of faith that this is going to happen. Andy Bischoff, obviously with the Giants, all the same reasons they could have signed him last year, but run game coordinator now with the Chargers. I just think it makes a ton of sense for him to be there. I don't know, at minimum pushing the guys like Zion, but maybe more so like Jamari, but Jamari they feel better about.
Yeah, I am very curious what they feel about Jamari because they never really gave him a chance, and then it was like week 18, we're doing a training camp competition again, and then he played awful in the playoff game. So
yes, they were right the whole time. No, do you actually given what happened, and frankly, Trey and Jamari aren't exactly the same investment. Do you think Zion even gets a competition?
I think they would be. I think it would be very hypocritical of them to not bring in competition for Zion at minimum.
Okay.
I don't think you can have this mantra of like competitors welcome and then watch Zion's tape and be like, yeah, like unquestioned starter again. And this is me. Like, I love Zion.
Yeah.
His play in 2024 did not merit an unquestioned starter. Like, you have to bring in competition. If the competition is a $3 million Ben Bredeson, like that's better than nothing. At least like have an opportunity for it. If that's I would kind of hate them taking a guard in the first couple of rounds, but a lot of other people seem to think that it's a possibility. So I think there's a good chance Zion is still a starter, but I think they bring in somebody to push him.
They should. They should started with no guard film.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
Next one here is Austin Corbett, who I think is worth bringing up just because he can play center or guard. The Chargers have shown an affinity for former Carolina Panthers already. So that checks out.
It always worked.
It always worked. It was perfect. So he actually had a pretty good contract, 3 years, $8.7 million APY previously. Do not have a current projection for Austin Corbett. Similarly to the other centers on here, if you're the Panthers, do you really want to let your veteran center walk in free agency when you have a guy like Bryce Young? Probably not. But if he does hit free agency, he has flexibility across all 3 spots. He's played zone, he's played gap. He's probably a gap center. But I do think he could play guard. He is a bigger guard, but his best play has probably been at center. There is an injury history. He missed a good amount of games this past season. I think he missed the entire 2021 season with the Rams when they won the Super Bowl. And he's only played over 1,000 snaps twice in his 7-year career. So I think there are questions. If you're not the Panthers, can you really count on this guy being a starter? I would probably say no.
Not to keep banging this drum, I guess, but okay, let's say Bozeman is back. Do they actually even have competition with him in bringing Corbett? Like, is this an assumption? Okay, would he be an option for the Chargers with our assumption that Bradley Bozeman is coming back?
Probably not.
Okay,
probably not.
Okay.
I think I think the backup center is a draft pick, and if that guy happens to be better than Bradley Bozeman in training camp, then I think they would be like, oh, like, let's give this a chance. But I think they are going to head into the offseason with Bradley Bozeman still pegged as the starting center.
Cool.
And like, it sucks, but I get it. Like, the options at center are not great. And everybody's like,
yeah,
sign anybody. Well, we just talked about Ryan Kelly. Yeah. Ryan Kelly, like, he's great, but there's a really scary injury history for me. The next best option is Drew Dahlman, who's 100% not a scheme fit. The option after that is Coleman Shelton, and then Austin Corbett. Like, this draft, this free agency center group is not good. The draft group is not much better. So, like, if you're the Chargers, why would you look at this not so good free agency class and not so good draft class and be like, let's just bring back Bradley for another year?
Yeah, I don't think a team also that's now consisted of coaches that the Chargers fired is going to send McCoy over to the Chargers either.
True. Yeah, they're remaking basically like the whole Charger staff. So I think I saw
it, man.
I think I saw that they're interviewing Kevin Koger, and like they're I don't know.
Who's your double? Because he coached for the Saints, didn't he?
Will Hoyt, but him and Brandon Staley hate each other.
Oh, that's right. Never mind.
Rickers Rim said that they like were almost like at fists in the locker room.
That wouldn't have ended well for Brandon Staley.
No, it would have ended very poorly.
That's right.
But I think I saw like Ronaldo Hill is also going to be there. So they're just bringing everybody back that doesn't hate Brandon. So it's super fun for them, I guess. Okay, worth mentioning.
Great.
We switched this title tier name to "Is he still going to play?" because I have no idea. The first one is Zach Martin, which I can't do an interior offensive line episode and not talk about Zach Martin, just because like he's a declining player. But this is Zach Martin we're talking about. Like, this is the pinnacle of guard play in my lifetime. Unquestionably the best guard that I have ever watched. Like, when the Chargers hired Kellen Moore, I ended up just like half the time watching their offense and just like focusing on Zach Martin because it's Zach Martin. Like, how could I not? So just great vibes. I would love to see him sign just because. That being said, he did have a career low pass blocking efficiency in 2024. He was still 4th in ESPN's run block win rate, so he can still be a great run blocker. Apologies for the typo again there. This was not my best work in terms of typos today. But I just think, like, for the vibes, this will be fun. The Chargers love Notre Dame connections, so I question whether or not he would get an actual 4-year, $9.5 million per year contract like PFF thinks.
4? I didn't even realize that until you just said it out loud.
Yes.
What?
Yeah, 4 years. I think they've missed the part where Zach Martin has like actively talked about retiring. So there's that. But again, this is just like, I would love to see it just because he's awesome. And even if it's only for 1 year, I think it'd be really cool.
I'd get it, man. I would absolutely get it. You certainly wouldn't have a lack of knowledge in that room for sure. Yeah, that would be, as well. I don't know if he's talking about Jamari at center or not. But as Morningstar points out, instant O-line upgrade.
No, that's another bit. He loves Jamari and wants to put him at center. So,
well, Zach Martin would be, frankly, a lot of these guys would be an instant upgrade over Jamar or Trey Pipkins. But if he wants to leave and if he wants to play, and if you do the homework and check out that everything's fine medically, I don't know, man. That'd be I know you're getting that Zach Martin Chargers jersey.
Oh, 100%. 100%. You know, the other good thing I'm just realizing is that Rashawn wears number 70 because of Zach Martin. Rashawn Slater idolizes Zach Martin. So it would also be really cool for Rashawn. So I'm all in favor. Rashawn can have whatever he wants.
Yeah, man. Give me Zach Martin. I don't know. There's so many questions, and yet it's just like, yeah, fuck it, do
it. Yeah, just would be really cool. Give me Aaron Banks and Zach Martin, I guess. The last one here, which he hasn't talked a ton about retiring like Zach Martin has, but Kevin Zeitler almost retired after Baltimore. And then he went and signed a 1-year, $6 million contract to the Lions and was like awesome. Like everybody who watched him said that he was incredible on tape, and that's backed up by the numbers. He was the 3rd best Gaskin grade, 4th in PFF's wins above replacement, 13th in pass blocking efficiency rating. So there's still like he's playing at a really, really high level. He signed a 1-year, $6 million contract, like I said, and PFF is basically projecting a repeat there. There's connections all across the board. He did play 1 year in New York when Andy Bischoff was there, and then he played with the Ravens. So he knows basically in the entire offensive coaching staff outside of like Marcus Brady and Tressman and all those guys. So this could be another option where I don't know if he signs right away. So like theoretically, you could go get your long-term starter, and then after the draft, like circle back with Kevin Zeitler and be like, "Hey man, like you want to come play some guard in LA?" Like I wouldn't be shocked if this happens. You know, this could be your Zion Johnson upgrade, so to speak.
Man, it's you're trying to get rid of Zion Johnson so bad this episode. No, I'm kidding.
It's the progress.
Do you like the end of these options kind of more than the middle of the guys we talked about?
Yes, actually, I do.
The way I mean, obviously Zach Martin. If you get Zach Martin to be Zach Martin, that's a different story. But with him, Banks, some of these guys versus someone like Fries,
yeah,
with some. I mean, everybody's got question marks. These guys are not here because they're other than Martin, who has his own question marks. These guys all have question marks. But I kind of like the end of this group here that we've been discussing, or that you've mostly been discussing.
You know, I love guard play. What can I say? Yeah, I think the Chargers are in a really good spot. You know, there's some long-term questions in this show. Like, obviously, you're not signing Kevin Zeitler or Zach Martin to be long-term fits, right? But can they give you some flexibility in the short term, and then you can figure out your long-term guard situation next year? Yeah, 100%. So theoretically, like I know you think Zion's still the guy, but there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to go out and get some competition in here. Given how the Chargers want to play, given how they prioritize the offensive line, I think it is plausible that they go sign an Aaron Banks and they bring in a Patrick McCarry or Aaron Banks and Kevin Zeitler, and you swap out your 2 guards, and you'd still, I think, have Bradley Bozeman, starting at center. But that's still a significant upgrade, dude. If they get Aaron Banks and Kevin Zeitler, like sign me the heck up for that group. So I know everybody wants Trey Smith, and I do too. Like I think he is unquestionably the safest star free agent the Chargers could sign. But if they don't, like I think they have some good options here, and I think Aaron Banks is probably my top choice after that. But give me Zach Martin for a year, like heck yeah, or Kevin Zeitler for a year. I think that's a great situation as well.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think I don't mind. There's a genuine, obviously would love Trey Smith. I love the world where the Chargers just make intermediate signings to improve the roster rather than, and Ortiz has said as much, we're not one player away. Not that Trey Smith's contract is $40 million a year, but I get it. You want to improve 2 spots on the line instead of 1, even though they're not as big of an improvement. Okay.
Yeah. So if you could have an offensive line left to right of Rashawn, Aaron Banks, Bradley Bozeman, Kevin Zeitler, and then Joe Alt. And then your backups are Zion, a rookie center. Maybe Jamari still is your kind of your swing tackle type, or maybe you bring back Foster Sorrell. I don't know, but
or say his name. Come on, your fave. Who played right guard against the Chiefs?
Oh, Sam Mustipher.
There you go.
But you got to get some kind of backup tackle. So that's why I like Patrick McCarry so much, because he could be an upgraded version of Trey, where he can be your right guard and then he can be your swing tackle also. So I think Patrick McCarry makes a ton of sense. And if you're paying your two guards a combined $18 million APY, you could lower their cap hits. Like, you can have that flexibility. I do think that makes a ton of sense.
Yeah. Cool.
So I'll end the show with this. I have heard that the Chargers are doing extensive homework on Will Fries and Aaron Banks. So I shared that in the Discord. I shared the Fries thing a couple weeks ago, actually. That doesn't mean the Chargers are not doing homework on Trey Smith, but from what I have heard, they have identified Fries and Banks as like the top two guys that could be options for them.
Yeah, makes sense. Smith is kind of I don't know.
He's an easy one to do homework on. They've studied him extensively already. So
exactly. Yeah, so I get why you'd go for the probably next best available guard, and then somebody else who you have some like familiarity with, who kind of fits. Yeah. So I like both.
Yeah, and they don't need to do homework on Zeitler. They don't need to do homework on McCarry. Like,
right.
they already have that. So it makes sense that they are doing the work on the two guys that they do not have connections to.
Yeah. Gennaro wants us to say Bozeman one more time. So
Bozeman.
And
I get it. Like, he was bad last year, but I don't think they have other choices. I think they are going to look at the center market, the center draft class, and just choose the guy that they know. And that's Bradley Bozeman.
Yeah. Sorry, I was stepping there. Rike, I believe I've responded to your original comment about the Discord link. So yeah.
We did have one super chat from today.
Cool.
Blake wants to know our top 5 Chargers of all time. He says, BTFU, love the pod. Thank you, Blake, for hopping in here.
Okay. I mean, some of this is
the top 4. I feel like are relatively easy.
Yeah. So Sale,
LT,
Gates, LT,
Gates,
and then it kind of depends on your quarterback of preference.
Yeah.
At that point. Sorry, born in 95. I'm going with Phillip Rivers.
Same.
Dan Fouts lose the points on the commentary at CBS. So that's a tiebreaker, I guess.
He's gotten much worse with his age as well.
Yeah. It's really the fifth guy.
Yeah.
I mean, do you put respect on Leslie O'Neal for being the sack leader? Do you go with, I don't know,
Allworth?
Yeah.
Keenan.
Keenan could be there for sure. I think Keenan could have cracked the top 5 if he were still a Charger and had more years as a Charger.
Sure.
But you can't deny what he's done.
I would make an argument. McConkey. I would make an argument that Weddle should at least be in that conversation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because he was a Pro Bowler like 6 straight years. He was an All-Pro twice.
Yeah.
But I would probably say the easy choice is just to do both quarterbacks. Even though neither of us watched Fouts, but like, he is a Hall of Famer.
Yeah. No, that's definitely fair. I don't know. That one Mike Williams performance in Arrowhead. Keenan Allen on Thanksgiving.
Sorry, I'm just laughing. Okay, this is hilarious. Dark Samus, who was not in here today. I think this is crazy that we talked about an offensive line episode and he's not in here. But Morningstar sending in a super chat. Jamari locked up Aiden Hutchinson in their combine, in their playoff game, for what it's worth. I think Guy is a dog. When I saw that clip, I was hyped when we drafted him. We liked him as well. I think, I had him as a top 5 guard in that class. I was pretty excited for him. But he's not a center. Like, there's zero chance I'm putting Jamari Sawyer at center at all. But I appreciate the bit, and thank you, Morningstar, for the super chat.
I could be wrong, but I feel like when I interviewed him, he didn't even mention teams looking at him at center. It was just like
guard or tackle, yeah.
Guard or tackle, yeah. And if you want to get more athletic at center, respectfully, that is not Jamari.
No.
Who surprised me a few times, given the reputation and build and whatnot, but that's not him.
Yeah, his best spot is guard, and it's unfortunate we didn't really get to see him ever really take that next step. I still think he could be, an average guard, but the Chargers need better than average right now. Blake came back and said his top 5 is LT, Seau, Joyner, Keenan, and Merriman. Sean Merriman's tough because his 3-season stretch is probably the best stretch of any non-Seau defensive Charger. But he didn't play long enough, man. Like, I don't think we can even put him in the top 10 for how little he actually played.
Right. Yeah, that's the thing. Who would your 1 be?
I would say 1 is LT.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say that's LT. I don't really remember Seau much. Like, I remember Seau the Patriot, unfortunately. And I remember Seau the Dolphin, but I don't really remember him on the Chargers. But you look at his statistics are insane, and he was like the main reason they went to the Super Bowl. So I think it's difficult to not put him at 2. And then 3, I would say, is Gates. I think the top 3 is pretty firm for me. And then 4 is whichever quarterback you like better. And for me, that's Rivers.
Yeah, unquestionably. Get him, pay him whatever Brady's making in the booth. I don't really care for Brady.
No, I think he sucks in the booth.
No, that was a rough Super Bowl, man.
I think he's so boring. And part of it, I do think, is the restrictions the league placed on him. Like, he doesn't get to be in the buildings with these teams. So, I do think that plays a part. But I think he's too boring. And part of that, I'm not going to lie, part of it is because I love Greg Olsen. Greg Olsen's probably my favorite booth guy because he's the rare former player who will also talk about analytics in like a positive way. And I just think he really knows his stuff. I think he's got a great personality. So I really wish Greg Olsen had done that Super Bowl because I think he's the best in the business right now.
Yeah.
Oh, anywho. Okay, so Blake is coming back and says, "My bad, Gates over Merriman." That's fair, but I get it. Like I said, Merriman's peak is probably the best non-Seau defensive peak we've seen as Chargers fans, but it only lasted 3 years, unfortunately.
Yeah, do it. Chargers, Tom Telesco, 3rd round pick, Rushmore, go.
Tom Telesco, 3rd round pick. Obviously, Keenan
Henley.
Dayon Henley probably, and then Trey Pipkins is probably next.
And the rest of the mountain just crumbled. Like we know.
And then Josh Palmer probably.
Actually, yeah, probably.
Oh man. Man. Tom's very nice, and he was great on our podcast.
He is.
But, man, the draft history is not great.
Yeah, love that he just got the Raiders potentially. Maybe the greatest tight end of all time when all is said and done. And
so annoying.
Like, okay, thanks.
So annoying. Weirdly enough, though, like his 2023 class might end up being his best class ever.
Yeah, he left us with Dayon Henley. He'll be like an all-pro next year. But coaching, I suppose.
Yeah, best non-first round class, I should say. Obviously.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll see.
All right. So we're gonna have one more episode of these. We're gonna do secondary next week, I think.
Sure.
Sure. Okay. I thought we were doing that, but we'll figure it out. And then I think the week after next week is the combine. So we'll have some draft stuff starting the week after that. So full steam ahead towards the free agency and the draft. And yeah, if you do not know about the Discord, definitely get in there through Patreon or through YouTube membership. The links have been posted there, so you should be able to find that. If you can't, you can message us and we'll give you the link. So this has been a great time. I think we got up to like 260, so that's cool for an offensive line episode. Works for me.
Mm-hmm.
I had a great time, and hopefully you guys did too. So we will see you next week. This has been the Guilty as Charged podcast. As always, bolt up.